Should we do a final round? Unless there's...
We spoke about fertilizers, GMOs, etc. as a mean to increase productivity. I think we forgot one key element, which is the most basic element in life, which is water. I think my question would be a little bit extreme, but I'll ask it. Is it could we see in a foreseeable future a moment where there would be a competition between water designed to go to irrigate and to grow food and the actual water that to be consumed? The parallel comes because we always jeopardize the parallel between biofuel, corn diversion to go to biofuel. Is it foreseeable that water becomes so scarce that there's a competition between drinking and eating? Or washing?
You have a big difference. You use about 83% of water for agriculture. 83%. You need just a little to drink. You not have a disequilibrate.
We're approaching. We have 12 minutes, so I'll give a couple of minutes to each of our panelists to help us wrap this up, and I'll do a conclusion if you don't mind. In the order where we start.
Okay, well, I'm not going to wrap up, but there are some loose ends that maybe let me take those in order to get the overall picture. It's good we raised the issue of water. I think the main issue about water is that water is not globally scarce. Water does not exhaust itself. It's in the hydrological system. Water is a local problem and never a global problem. Having said that, you need to deal with it globally, therefore, locally, or at least regionally, because there are many problems where countries share a common watershed. The key issue in agriculture is that you have the water and the fertilizer and the plant all there at the same time. That's really the fine-tuning that we need, that we do not have. In terms of irrigation, it's perhaps important to realize that in China, I think it's now 23% of the agriculture area that's irrigated. It's a little bit more in India. It's only 4% in sub-Saharan Africa. Yet, about 3 times more production comes off irrigated land than non-irrigated land. There's an enormous potential, especially in Africa. If you look at Lake Victoria, Lake Malawi, those are all huge bodies of water that we're not using. So there is an enormous investment there. But again, irrigating without having the right type of fertilizer at the right time will lead to all kinds of salinization problems that have destroyed entire civilizations. Think of the Sumerians, Mesopotamia, and so on. So this is where education, extension, fine-tuning are important. On waste, I want to take that issue back. Our colleague has gone. But it is indeed true that between 30 or 40% of the food actually does not reach the consumer. That's for 2 reasons. One, in poor countries, because it's eaten by rats and insects and what have you, and it deteriorates. This is indeed where GMOs can help a lot. The technology is there indeed to extend the shelf life of, say, tomatoes or fruits and vegetables for much longer, and to make sure we do not destroy the outside skin, for example, of vegetables. So there's a lot of potential there. But the other half of that waste comes from developed countries, from rich countries. Why? Because we are so scared collectively that we eat something that's 1 day over the preferred date that supermarkets and households throw away enormous amounts of food. The average British household throws away 300 kilos of food a year. And that is totally unnecessary. So there is, again, something that has to do with our rules and regulations. I think the main issue in richer countries and for urban upper class and middle class in poor countries is that food is actually too cheap. And to give you one statistic that I always find very staggering, in the 1950s in Europe, the average household would spend half of its income on food. Today, it's 10%. And this also applies to the urban classes, the educated urban classes in many so-called poor countries. So waste remains a real issue. I think the other thing that we haven't mentioned that I feel quite strongly about is pest control. As you get more intensive agriculture, you get more disease and pest pressure. And in fact, adding nitrogen or phosphate to a plant actually means that that plant is also more palatable and more attractive to insects. So the control of the whole ecosystem, including all these nasty beasties, goes together with increased intensification of agriculture. And so in fact, what it is all about is it's increased fine-tuning, it's increased education of farmers. And that is something, as I said before, we really lack the tools for it, we lack the motivation, we lack the political will to create a class of entrepreneurial top-rate farmers. Now, the thing where I feel we need global governance to raise that point is in the issue of GMOs. What I'm worried about is not about the GMOs themselves. I think there's reasonably good evidence that there are risks of GMOs as we know them now, and as we talk about the genome constructs that we know now, do not present any additional risk either to human health or to the environment. But that's not the proof of the contrary. And what I would really like to see is an international body that deals with some of the evidence as it comes out of different countries, that sets up international standards for reporting on GMO-related problems, and sort of gets out of the way some of the fears that exist in some countries, but also some of the wild testing going on in other countries. And I think there is still a long way that we need to go. Lastly, maybe one positive statistic that I want to share with you. We keep on saying the land is scarce. However, the latest reviews of land availability actually do show that we still have some margins. We still have about 500 million hectares, either in arid, but particularly also in semi-arid areas that are not being used and have good agricultural production potential. The question is how we use them, how do we best use them. A major part of that is in Africa and in some of it in Latin America, but particularly also in Central Asia. So we have a little bit more land than we thought, but it doesn't take away from us the burden to really produce sustainably and equitably as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't help it, but that international body that you mentioned, why couldn't it be the FAO?
Oh my God, I mean, you give me an hour and I'll talk about the FAO, but not now.
Just to mention the last point and to give an optimistic signal, we've got part of the population in Brazil which is, as you know, from which has African origins. But the fact is that Brazil has discovered Africa recently. It means that nowadays Africa is seen not only by the government, but also by private companies as a new frontier. And this has some positive consequences. For instance, many private foundations have been created in the last 10 years up to create training programs and support initiatives with research centers in Africa. The purpose is to try to transfer what is the core experience of Brazil during the last 40 years. We have developed a central area which is called the Cerrados, a savanna region, and in many aspects, these Cerrado areas have common points with different African countries. So we try to transfer the best of what we did in the Cerrado area to help and to create conditions in some African country for production to grow. Just to give some example, there is a very interesting program in Mozambique, in Angola, in Guinea, where the Brazilian company Vale is producing iron ore. It also supports different farm programs. The same company and others Brazilian companies are supporting farm initiatives in Mozambique, in Malawi, in Zambia. And probably one of the most interesting points for the next coming years is that there will be a deeper cooperation between private initiative, Brazilian private initiative, Brazilian government organizations such as Embrapa, which is the National Agronomy Institution, and African institutions. Brazil has discovered Africa, and this is probably something very positive in the scenario we are talking about here.
One of the most enlightened few ideas I read on Africa were from Monsieur Severino. Do you want to say a few words about Africa and your experience? Or is this too much of a surprise? No? I was talking to the gentleman behind you. Ah, c'est pas Monsieur Severino. Ah, je suis désolé. No, I made a mistake.
I'm willing to give my expertise on anything.
I have to use Sorry about that. So, if there are no more questions, look, but by way of wrapping up, actually I would just mention that this is an appetizer. And if you like the appetizer, the main dish will be served in Rabat, 7th, 8th, and 9th of March. You're all invited. This will be a global conference on food security. We'll emphasize things that were discussed here, but in particular innovation, because I think one needs innovation, and innovation that reaches not only the farmer but also the markets. So innovation in business models is also very important. And the other key element that Mr. Thoraitis mentioned, which is important, is going beyond just discussions and phrases and initiatives, concrete initiatives. So some of the things you mentioned, Mr. Thorait, the Rabat Food Security Conference is a platform for actually launching concrete initiatives and having partners, both public and private sector partners, contribute to launch concrete initiatives. It would be a failure from our point of view if that conference didn't come out with concrete initiatives. So we hope to see you, most of you, or all of you, in Rabat in a couple of months, as it stands now, 3 months' time. I think there are brochures, there are brochures you can pick up on that, and we hope to see you in Rabat, inshallah. Thank you.